What did he go through?
Well, just people pointing and laughing. And,
Right.
In pain, constant.
His pain was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Because of wrestling.
No,
because of the growth.
Yeah.
Yeah. His body just
continually grow. You know, let's think about what a day is. Well, a bed don't fit too well.
Right.
Let's talk about hotels and bathrooms.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Andre the Giant was more than just a wrestler. He was a legend. Towering over his opponents, he seemed almost invincible, a larger-than-life figure who could crush anyone in the ring. Fans saw him as an unstoppable force, a hero of professional wrestling. But behind that powerful image was a man carrying a burden few ever knew about. His story wasn't just about fame and glory, it was filled with pain, secrets, and struggles hidden from the public eye. On January 27th, 1993, Andre took his last breath in a hotel room in Paris.
I'd like to announce the death of one of my favorite wrestlers and one of the most famous wrestlers of all time, and Andre the Giant. He died this week in Paris, France, after going home to his father's funeral.
The world lost a wrestling icon that day, but the truth about his final moments remained buried in mystery. What really happened during those last hours? What was he going through when the cameras weren't rolling? For years, the full story was left untold until now. In a shocking episode of the Joe Rogan Experience, a former wrestling colleague finally broke his silence. After decades of keeping quiet, he revealed secrets that could change everything we thought we knew about Andre the Giant. These weren't just minor details, they were shocking truths that painted a completely different picture of the man behind the legend. Andre may have ruled the ring, but outside of it, he faced battles far greater than any match he ever fought. And now, for the first time, the world is about to hear the real Saint One, the rise of a giant. Andre Roussimoff was born in a small village in France on May 19, 1946.
Andre Rene Roussimoff was born in France, but ended up calling North Carolina his home. Better known as Andre the Giant, a massive man standing 7'4", weighing more than 500 pounds.
From the very beginning, it was clear that he was different. Unlike other children, Andre grew at an alarming rate due to a rare condition known as acromegaly. This disorder, caused by an excess of growth hormone, made his bones and tissues continue to grow even after most people would have stopped. By the time Andre was just a young boy, he was already much taller and heavier than his classmates. At age 12, he stood over 6 feet tall, making him a towering presence among his peers. While some might think this was a blessing, for Andre, it came with significant challenges. His body constantly ached, and his joints struggled to support his rapid growth. Simple childhood activities like running, jumping, and playing with friends became difficult for him. Despite his struggles, Andre had a strong work ethic from a young age. His family owned a farm, and he was expected to help with daily chores. But as he grew older, his sheer size made it difficult for him to fit into a normal life. Chairs, beds, and even cars were not built for someone of his stature. Everyday objects that most people took for granted became obstacles in his life. Realizing that traditional jobs were not an option, Andre's journey led him to professional wrestling. With his incredible size and strength, he was a natural fit for the sport. He trained hard, developing his skills and learning how to use his immense frame to his advantage. It didn't take long before promoters saw his potential, and he was soon traveling across Europe, competing in various wrestling circuits. By the 1970s, Andre had become an international sensation. Fans were mesmerized by his sheer presence. He was unlike anything they had ever seen before. At 7 feet 4 inches tall and weighing over 500 pounds, he was truly larger than life. Organizations quickly realized his value, and soon he was headlining events around the world. His matches were not just about skill, but spectacle. People came to see the giant in action. He wrestled in Japan, Canada, and the United States, drawing massive crowds wherever he went. But it was in the 1980s, during his time in the WWF, now WWE, that he truly cemented his place in wrestling history. One of the most unforgettable moments in wrestling took place at WrestleMania 3 in 1987. The event was held at the Pontiac Silverdome in Michigan, with over 93,000 fans in attendance. The main event? A legendary showdown between Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan. At that time, Hogan was the face of professional wrestling, but Andre was the immovable force standing in his way. The match was more than just a battle. It was a moment that defined an era. Fans watched in awe as these two titans clashed. The climax of the fight came when Hogan lifted Andre off the ground and body slammed him, a moment that sent shockwaves through the arena. It was a feat that no one believed was possible, and it solidified both men's legacies in wrestling history. But while the world saw Andre as an unstoppable force, few people knew the truth behind the scenes. The reality was far different from what fans saw on TV. By this time, Andre was already suffering from severe health problems. His joints were deteriorating, his back was in constant pain, and his mobility was becoming increasingly limited. Even walking to the ring was a struggle. Andre had spent years giving his all to the sport he loved, but his body was paying the price. Unlike other wrestlers, he didn't have the luxury of resting or taking breaks. His size meant that every movement put additional stress on his body. Yet he kept going, refusing to let the pain stop him from doing what he loved. He was the giant, after all, and the world expected him to be just that. The pain behind the fame. Andre's size made him a legend, but it also became his biggest curse. His body was constantly in pain. Simple tasks like walking, sitting, or even sleeping became a struggle. Because of his condition, his organs never stopped growing, which put a tremendous strain on his heart and joints. Every step he took felt like a burden, as his body struggled to support its massive frame. Despite his extraordinary strength in the ring, he often felt powerless against the agony he endured daily. Many fans saw him as invincible, but few understood that behind the scenes, he was in constant discomfort. His condition made medical treatment complicated, as there were few doctors who truly knew how to manage acromegaly in someone of his size. Pain medication only provided temporary relief, and even then, standard doses were often ineffective because of his enormous stature. Andre rarely spoke about his suffering, choosing instead to keep up appearances, smiling for the cameras and entertaining fans as if nothing was wrong. One of the ways Andre attempted to cope with his pain was through drinking. His drinking stories are legendary. He could reportedly consume over 100 beers in a single sitting.
Stories about Andre's drinking are almost another level of mythology from the man himself. Andre was certainly, one of, if not the greatest drinker that ever lived.
Bartenders would recall how he would drink entire bottles of liquor like they were glasses of water. While many found these stories amusing, treating them as part of his larger-than-life persona, the truth was much sadder. Andre didn't drink for fun. He drank to numb himself. Alcohol became his escape from the relentless pain, both physical and emotional. He was aware that excessive drinking was damaging his already fragile health, but it was one of the few ways he found relief. The wrestling business didn't make it any easier. Unlike other wrestlers who could take breaks to heal from injuries, Andre was constantly in demand. Promoters knew that his presence alone could sell out an arena, and they pushed him to perform night after night. His massive body took countless hits in the ring, only worsening his condition. The constant travel, long flights, and grueling match schedules left little time for him to rest or recover. Yet, he rarely complained, refusing to show weakness. Sleeping was another challenge. Because of his size, finding a comfortable position was nearly impossible. He couldn't fit in most beds, and hotel rooms often weren't designed to accommodate someone of his stature. He would sometimes sleep in hotel bathtubs or prop himself up with multiple pillows just to find a position that didn't cause unbearable pain. On many occasions, he barely slept at all, arriving at matches exhausted but still determined to give the fans what they expected. His pain wasn't just physical, it was emotional as well. Being the Giant meant that he was constantly treated as an attraction rather than a person. People stared at him wherever he went, often making insensitive comments or asking intrusive questions about his size. Some admired him, others feared him, but very few truly understood him. He was larger than life, but that also meant he was set apart from everyone else, making it difficult for him to form close, meaningful relationships. He longed for a sense of normalcy, but it was something he could never truly have. Despite being surrounded by fans, colleagues, and admirers, Andre often felt isolated. His massive frame made simple social interactions complicated. He couldn't sit in a normal chair at a restaurant, drive a regular car, or even enter certain buildings without ducking through doorways. Every aspect of his life was a reminder that he didn't fit into the world like everyone else. Him for his fame rather than for who he truly was. As his career progressed, his health continued to decline. By the late 1980s, his mobility was severely limited. His once powerful legs could barely support him, and the pain in his back and knees had become unbearable. Yet, he continued to wrestle, pushing his body beyond its limits because he felt a responsibility to his fans and the wrestling world that had given him so much. One of the most heartbreaking aspects of his story is that Andre never received the medical treatment that could have helped him. Acromegaly is a condition that, if treated early, can be managed to prevent excessive growth. However, in Andre's time, there was little understanding of the disease, and by the time treatments were developed, it was too late for him. Surgery or hormone therapy might have helped him live longer, but because he was never properly diagnosed until much later, his fate was already sealed. The world saw the Giant, but very few saw the man. Fans cheered as he dominated the ring, but they never saw the grimaces of pain hidden beneath his massive hands. They laughed at his drinking stories, never realizing that every sip was an attempt to dull the agony he carried with him. They admired his strength, but they never knew just how much suffering that strength was hiding. Andre the Giant was not just a wrestling legend, he was a man who carried an unbearable weight, both physically and emotionally. And through it all, he never let the world see him break. His final days in Paris. In January 1993, Andre traveled to France to attend his father's funeral. It was a difficult time for him. Losing a parent is never easy, but for Andre, it was especially painful. The loss of his father added to the burden he had already been carrying for years. His body was breaking down, and emotionally, he was exhausted. After the funeral, Andre checked into a hotel in Paris. It was supposed to be a short stay, a moment of solitude before returning to his routine. But in reality, he was more alone than ever. The years of physical pain, the grueling wrestling schedule, and the personal struggles had all caught up with him. His health had been declining rapidly in the months leading up to his trip. Close friends noticed that he moved slower, that his once thunderous voice was quieter, and that even his signature smile seemed more forced. Despite this, he never sought proper medical care. He had always refused treatment for his acromegaly, believing that doctors couldn't change his fate. On January 27, 1993, Andre the Giant passed away in his sleep. He was just 46 years old. The official cause of death was heart failure, but those who knew him best believed it was more than that. His body had endured years of relentless punishment, and eventually, it simply gave up. His passing marked the end of an era. The world had lost not just a wrestling legend, but a man who had redefined what it meant to be larger than life. Even in death, Andre remained a mystery, just as he had been in life. The shocking revelations on JRE. In an eye-opening episode of the Joe Rogan Experience, a former wrestling colleague finally spoke out about the heartbreaking reality of Andre the Giant's life. While fans saw a larger-than-life hero who dominated the ring, those who truly knew Andre understood the immense suffering he endured every single day. What was revealed on the podcast forced people to see Andre not just as a wrestling icon, but as a deeply troubled and lonely man who carried unimaginable burdens. One of the most heartbreaking revelations was just how much Andre struggled with his own identity. To the world, he was the giant, a spectacle, a force of nature that couldn't be ignored. But deep down, he never truly felt at home in his own body. His size, which had made him famous, was also his greatest prison. He was always the center of attention, but not in the way most people would want. People stared, whispered, and pointed. Even among his closest friends, he often felt like an outsider, unable to escape the fact that he was different. According to his colleague, Andre had confided in him about how isolating his life had become. He couldn't fit in anywhere physically or emotionally. Every aspect of daily life was a struggle. Simple things like sitting in a car, using public restrooms, or sleeping in a regular bed were constant challenges. He couldn't walk through a crowd without people gawking at him. He couldn't go to a restaurant without being treated like an attraction rather than a regular customer. He was a man, but the world only saw the giant. Perhaps the most shocking detail shared on JRE was Andre's deep emotional pain. He longed for normalcy, for companionship, but his size made it nearly impossible. Relationships were difficult because people often saw him as a novelty rather than a person. He had close friends in the wrestling industry, but even they couldn't fully understand the emotional toll of his condition. The loneliness weighed on him heavily, especially as he grew older and his health declined. The very thing that had made him famous, his towering stature, had also condemned him to a life of solitude. Another revelation that stunned listeners was the extent to which Andre relied on alcohol to cope with his pain. Stories of his legendary drinking were often told in a humorous light, tales of him downing entire cases of beer, emptying countless bottles of wine, and drinking until the early hours of the morning. But according to his colleague, Andre wasn't drinking to have fun. He was drinking to escape. The pain in his joints, the stress on his heart, and the overwhelming sense of isolation were unbearable. Alcohol was his refuge, the only thing that temporarily dulled both the physical and emotional agony he carried every day. Hearing these revelations, fans were forced to rethink everything they thought they knew about Andre the Giant. He wasn't just a wrestling superstar, he was a human being trapped in a body that wouldn't let him rest. The world adored him, but few truly understood the price he paid for that fame. His story was no longer just one of triumph and spectacle, but of deep pain, loneliness, and a desperate search for peace that he never quite found. By the time the JRE episode ended, one thing was clear. Andre's life was far more complex than the world had ever realized, and the truth about his struggles only made his legacy even more poignant. Andre's legacy, more than just a giant. Despite the pain, despite the struggles, Andre left behind a legacy that will never be forgotten. He was more than just a wrestler. He was a cultural phenomenon. His presence was so powerful that even those who had never watched professional wrestling knew his name. He changed the sport forever, and his influence stretched far beyond the ring into movies, pop culture, and even the way wrestling promotions treated their biggest stars. His impact on wrestling was undeniable. Before Andre, the world of professional wrestling had never seen a performer quite like him. He was billed as the eighth wonder of the world, and for good reason. His matches weren't just about competition, they were spectacles, must-see events that drew massive audiences. Every time he stepped into the ring, fans knew they were about to witness something special. He didn't need to be the fastest or the most technically skilled. His sheer size and charisma made every match unforgettable. One of his greatest contributions to wrestling was paving the way for future superstars. He set a precedent for how larger-than-life characters could be marketed and embraced by fans. Without Andre, there may never have been a Hulk Hogan, an Undertaker, or a Big Show. His ability to captivate audiences proved that wrestling was about storytelling just as much as athletic ability. He was living proof that a wrestler could transcend the sport and become a mainstream icon. Beyond wrestling, Andre's influence extended into Hollywood. His most famous film role was as Fezzik in The Princess Bride, a role that introduced him to an entirely new generation of fans. The character was gentle, kind, and humorous, a stark contrast to the fearsome persona he often portrayed in the ring. Despite his massive size, he was able to convey warmth and emotion on screen, earning him admiration from moviegoers who may have never seen him wrestle. His performance remains one of the most beloved parts of the film, solidifying his place in cinematic history. Andre's story also became a symbol of perseverance. His life was not easy. His immense size brought him constant pain, and his health deteriorated rapidly as he aged. Yet, he never let it stop him from doing what he loved. He pushed through the agony, performed for his fans, and continued to entertain even when his body begged him to stop. He didn't just wrestle, he gave himself to wrestling, dedicating his entire life to the sport. His legacy serves as a reminder that even the strongest people carry burdens we can't always see. The world saw Andre as an indestructible giant, but in reality, he was a man who struggled every single day. He battled physical pain, emotional isolation, and the weight of always being seen as different. Despite it all, he never complained. He kept going, kept performing, and kept giving the world moments they would never forget. His impact can still be felt today. The wrestling industry has changed since his time, but his name continues to be spoken with reverence. The WWE Hall of Fame was created in 1993, and fittingly, Andre was its very first inductee. It was a testament to just how much he meant to the business and how deeply he had influenced those who came after him. Even outside of wrestling, his story resonates. His life is a lesson in resilience, in pushing through pain, in finding ways to make the most of the circumstances you've been given. He was a man who carried more weight, both physically and emotionally, than most could ever imagine, yet he never let it break him. Perhaps the greatest measure of Andre's legacy is how he is remembered. Fans, friends, and colleagues don't just talk about his matches or his movies, they talk about him. They speak of his kindness, his generosity, his humor. He may have been a giant in size, but he was also a giant in heart. Andre Roussimoff was more than just a wrestling icon. He was more than just the eighth wonder of the world. He was a man who gave everything he had to entertain the world, even at the cost of his own well-being. And for that, he will never be forgotten. Andre. The Giant's story isn't just about wrestling, fame, or even his untimely death. It's about the reality of living as someone the world saw as larger than life. He was loved, admired, and celebrated, but in many ways, he was also misunderstood. His struggles were hidden behind the cheers of the crowd, his pain masked by his legendary strength. The revelations from the Joe Rogan Experience shed light on a man who gave everything to his fans but had very little left for himself. So the next time you think about Andre the Giant, don't just remember the wrestler, the icon, or the record-breaking superstar. Remember the man who carried a weight far heavier than any opponent he ever faced. Because in the end, the greatest battle he ever fought wasn't in the ring, it was within himself.